Morning, everybody. Welcome to a session today where we're going to talk about our experiences and insights from our organization's perspective from 30 years of cloud and AI ML integration. With me today, obviously, I'm James Smedley. I head up our data practice at Glue Reply. We've got my colleague, data architects, Savi and Sam as well. So we're going to present at different stages throughout the session. We welcome, if you want to jump in and ask any questions as we're going along, or we've got a space at the end as well where we can go through additional questions as well. So we're just going to jump straight into talk about the different challenges we see in that are preventing organizations from really leveraging their data. So how, they're having challenges where, for example, business users are really frustrated with the lack of availability in trusted data. So what this means is that they're really struggling to get the right access to data, to get visibility of that data. They can't find that data, maybe so there's no data lineage available. So it's thinking about all of the visibility of that data and being able to then self-service that. So I think there was a presentation yesterday which talked about the life cycle of data product development, where we talk about kind of speeding that journey up so that we can do that as a self-service model. So we see a lot of business users giving us that example back to us that you can't actually get access to that data that we need. There's huge demand. I think we've seen lots of presentations around data products as well. So again, we're not seeing that service properly in the right way, which means people are then having to build tactical solutions and deliver their own approaches to that, which then means there's no conformity, there's no ability to aggregate those products and services as well then. Another side of this is it's more IT-led. So what we see again in different organizations is this push towards the IT side of things, really trying to deliver solutions for the business. And then when the business takes ownership of that, they reject it because it doesn't cover off all of the requirements. It doesn't give them what they need in terms of the business outcomes and business benefits that they were hoping to receive. Whereas what we want to see is more of a shift towards the business leading that. So I think with paradigms like data mesh and things like that, it's pushing the innovation and autonomy into the business domains for them to then come up with their requirements, and then through data product management, lead that through with the delivery teams, if you like. So it's bringing those two worlds together much closer. And again, one of the concepts yesterday, time to deliver data projects, it just takes far too long. So in today's modern data architectures, this data should be available at the click of a button, and we should be able to spin up different data services quite quickly. But maybe due to lack of metadata, lack of data lineage, lack of data quality, maybe data observability and things like that, it's just taking too long to get to market with a new data product or data service. And then obviously the final side of this is we need new data strategies. So everything that crafts the different roadmaps and how we push forward with things, that needs to be delivered through new data strategies so that we can then begin to see those incremental business values being released along the journey then. So we do know, obviously, that there's lots of AI use cases that people have seen more recently. So in terms of software development, you can use AI to write new software and applications. So it's great to see those things happening, but we need to make sure that they're in the hands of the business users. We need to make sure that the software design, the implementation, deployment, and how the business truly leverages those is run by the business stakeholders. Again, we can't necessarily see the IT teams just delivering these apps and services, but then what's the adoption and rollout look like of those particular things then? And again, in terms of next-gen architectures, it's a big area of focus in one of our practices is trying to understand how AI plays its part in the whole next generation of different architectures. Moving towards a modern data architecture approach, making sure you've got event-driven data flows and things like this, but then making sure that you've got that flow of trusted data across the architecture then. And then one of the key things here, I think, is about this legacy modernization. So lots of the organizations we work with are in a state where they've got lots of data locked away in legacy platforms. So how do we liberate the data from those applications? So there's a potential opportunity through legacy modernization to use Gen AI to rewrite these applications and move us forward in liberating that data then. So I think a lot of the challenges we see, they're not new challenges, these. So as I've just mentioned then about legacy data estates. So, there's issues there about how do we put this, brand new technology on top of a legacy estate where maybe the data structure isn't quite right to adopt into that tool or technology. So we're finding that organizations are finding it difficult to put the latest tools and technologies on top of legacy data estates. Then in terms of technical challenges, we know it's complex, right? It always has been. Data's hard, technology's hard. Bringing all that together into a business value is hard as well. So again, these are common challenges that continue to make it difficult to adopt these new technologies. And then, as always, there'll always be the kind of the behavioral side. There's a resistance to change. So people will be worried about, do I want to adopt the latest tool and technology? Is it going to see us out of a job? Rather than thinking, how can I augment this into my daily life cycle? How can I use this to empower and make it quicker for me to do this next stage of development, whether it's develop an application, whether it's produce a data product or data service then. So then what do we need to see in terms of the AI and data strategies? So we need to see new data strategies, as I said earlier. So this is where we can produce tailored technology roadmaps. So this will show us the whole maturity curve and maturity set of steps that we go on. So we need to first understand where we are today, produce those data strategies with tailored roadmaps, as I've said, to then map out what does a modern data architecture look like for us. So in that space, that could mean understanding the people, the process, the tech, but then understanding how do we move from batch-driven architectures that don't necessarily support fast-flowing data sets that we need, which then leads us into the next step of how do we unlock that data potential. So what we need to focus on there is how do we actually enable continuous flow of trusted data. So that's what all of these AI applications will need, is lots of trusted data continuously flowing. And what we don't want to be doing is shoveling coal into the back end of these systems or these applications, which suddenly dry up in terms of the data, which then means the applications start to slow, which then is a bad experience for everybody there. And then obviously what we want to see is this concept of building the scalable foundation. So we know we need high quality data. We know we need data lineage. We know we need adaptable frameworks around our data governance, our data maturity and things like that, which will then give us the guardrails to operate in, which then pushes us forward in how we produce data enablement within the business side of things to allow those teams in the business units to then push forward and do the innovation through autonomous kind of design and things like that, self-service into the data sets as well. So I'm going to hand over to Savi now, who's going to talk through essentially what does good look like in terms of this data strategy, in terms of the foundations and how we enable the continuous flow of trusted data.
Cool, thanks James. So I think most of us here are probably working in data teams or in the data space. So I think within the data space, people have a good idea of what is good, what do we need to do our jobs and what's the benefit that we can give to organizations. But I think the difficulty comes in communicating to the business. Why do I need a data mesh? Why do I need a data dictionary? What's the point of all of this thing? What's the point of making me a data owner? What does that actually get me? I think that's sometimes the issue, and I think in lots of projects that we've worked on, we've delivered, or the data team has delivered great solutions, great tech, but the business doesn't want to adopt it. They stick with their spreadsheets, they stick with what they're doing at the moment because that's what they get, that's what they understand, and they don't really see the benefits. And I think what we need to do is sort of articulate what does good look like and what does it get you. And I think starting from the benefits and then talking to business to say, if we do this, this is what you get out of it, starts to decompose some of these technical terms into things that they actually get out at the end of it. So when we talk about trusted data, we've worked with clients where there's a data warehouse in place, but no one trusts the data warehouse. It's got 3 layers of data, the normal staging, conformed, curated, but people were going into the data warehouse and fetching data as they saw fit from the different layers, and sometimes even from the source buckets, because they didn't know where the data was coming. They liked specific sets of data, so they were taking the data as and when they saw fit, and then they'd also clone the DB and then use that rather than use the data warehouse, because the data warehouse was changing at different points in time and no one knew why it was changing and what operations had been performed on it. And to get to a situation where you have trusted data, you need the tools around it. You need your data dictionary, you need your data quality tools, you need like the data quality report sitting around it. And it's this idea of non-invasive governance where we open up the data sets to the business to tell them, here's the lineage, this is what's happened to the data, you can actually trust it, this is where it's come from, and this is why you should be using it, as opposed to people just getting DB access and then taking what they need as and when they require it. So that's one of the things that's key for data, is that making it trusted. And then when we talk about agile, a lot of business get frustrated with the IT teams because you're waiting for the big shiny data platform to come out, but that's going to take months and months. They don't have access to data. If you want to make a change to a report, you can't change it because there's a backlog of work that's sitting with the IT team before you can actually get to it. And this is kind of where the whole data mesh idea becomes quite powerful, in that if you adopt a domain-driven approach where you spin up centers of excellences where you've got engineers or data consumers who've been skilled up and given the actual tools to query data, query good sets of data, and then put them together the way that they need, you start democratizing data. So it's not just like a word to say, oh, we're doing data democratization, we've got a data dictionary that people can look up. It's actually, they can look up the data, but they can also use it in the governed way. They can use it effectively. So it's kind of moving beyond saying the words, but actually stitching 2 things together. So put the data dictionary in place, but also give them the access to get to the data. And also spin up center of excellences that you're training up people to use data appropriately. And then that's kind of sort of goes into this whole idea of self-service, where you're giving users access to the right tools, you give them the decision-making powers or you enable decision-making where the SMEs who know the data the best are able to access the data, know where it comes from, and they can also then publish data sets to other areas of the business. And it all sort of hinges around a central tooling set where you've got a data dictionary, a data product catalog, an AI product catalog, where people can come and reuse things. And this is sort of going into this whole consistency, where if in an organization you've got different meanings of a specific term, so we work for an asset manager where, depending on the part of the business that you work for, assets under management is a different metric, which sounds bizarre, but is actually, for different contexts, it's actually appropriate to have a different definition. But unless that definition is written down and the provenance of that metric is made clear to people, what you have is arguments around the business saying, no, you're using the wrong number, you should be using this number. But what was needed was the context to say, this is what it actually means in this context for finance reporting, but this is what it means for a specific client, in that that's their assets as opposed to the assets of the partnership. But this idea of bringing in data owners and stewards, but then also you can't appoint a data owner or a steward without telling them why they're the data owner, the steward, and they need to be empowered to be able to input into the definition of a data product or a data asset. So that's their business rules that are going into the building of the product. And they need to be brought into this whole journey of domain-driven design, where it's the business giving the requirements to the IT teams or the technical teams, wherever they sit, whether it's centrally or within the domains themselves, so that what is actually being built is what the business want. we were approached by a client once where they'd built a master data management solution, which was rejected by the business because it had been done in isolation by the IT teams. And when it was released, it was essentially the result that they were spitting out was the wrong result. So it was a very expensive program that had to sort of be remediated, which we supported them with. But it's how IT teams and the business can diverge. And using data owners and data stewards is like a key component of bringing them into that process. But they have to be sort of coached through that process and given the right forums and opportunities to input at the right points in time. And then, I think everyone knows this, garbage in, garbage out. So if you want to do AI and ML, if you're using rubbish data, if you don't have data, you're not going to get the outputs that you want. I think everyone's got stories of where they've gone into an organization or been in the data science team and not actually had access to data. So the data teams or the data science teams spend a lot of time going around the organization trying to grab Excel sheets or databases or whatever they can get their hands on to try and find a problem to solve, but they've not been enabled by being given the data that they can work with. And often, and it's a bit unfortunate, often data science is sort of there to tick a box. So if you don't have the business there to say, these are my pain points, these are my problems, it's often a case of data science teams looking for problems to solve as opposed to realizing actual business value by talking to the business and working out what are their actual pain points. It's quite funny because if you go into certain organizations, the things that you'd think are basic and easy to get hold of, especially in the big organizations, how many employees do I have, is actually quite a hard number to nail down, especially if it's like a federated, siloed group. And having access to data or having access to data catalog or curated data sets to know what's available, where can I get information from, is kind of key. That's why the whole data governance piece kind of comes into its own in enabling AI. Oh, I've gone through the slides in the wrong order, sorry. But yeah, and then the main reason that the finance team like the idea of reusing data is, why should you build the same data product or data service multiple times when someone else has already got it, but it's just unknown to the rest of the business? And as you get into the process of building data products, data services, and like sort of turn it into a factory type process, it kind of opens up more opportunities in monetizing data. So where data becomes a value stream, where you can kind of identify the data sets that, whilst they're not useful for your business, they'll be useful for other business externally. And you've got opportunities to monetize quality data sets that you're collecting as part of a business's operations that may be useful in other contexts. And I think I'm going to hand over to Sam to talk about what we do, what we think the answer to this is. So how do we get to what good looks like? So Sam.
Cool, thank you. So I think Savi and also James have kind of alluded to some problems that we see in quite a broad context. Like Savi said, what I would like to do very quickly is just to dial it in ever so slightly into something a bit more specific, like Savi said, that we think ends up being a solution to, if not all of these problems, then a significant majority. And that is the idea of a data marketplace. So I think certainly in the last few years, this is a concept which has started to kind of really gain traction. But its core fundamentals are based a lot in solving the problems that James and that Savi mentioned. You know, this idea of having access to trusted data, knowing where the data comes from, knowing what it's supposed to do, knowing that it's properly governed. Those are all really key foundational elements to a data marketplace. And I think it's, from our experience, it's a really useful way, one, of kind of giving that access to data and that visibility within an organization, but also two, of kind of presenting this solution. I think at a business level, at an organization level, the idea of a data marketplace really resonates with people. I think it's, as a concept, I think it's quite easy to understand, the idea behind it. So I've got here just a few kind of progressing definitions of what you might say a data marketplace is. But essentially, yeah, it's this platform that will enable you to get more value out of the data. So rather than working in silos in a federated model, you're actually saying, I've got this really good data, it's for this purpose, and I'm advocating for it. I'm saying, hey, other people can use this, other people can get value from it, rather than just a one-and-done activity I'm working off in my little corner. Moving on to the next slide. So in terms of how you get to that data marketplace, we've kind of come about these three sections. So we've got guardrails, so making sure that you're nailing the limits and that governance aspect, and then the enablers, so that kick on, that real movement that you get, and then the foundational data capabilities. So you need the data architecture, you need data quality, you need all of these other things. Sorry, one sec. And then, so if we're going into the guardrails, so we've got stuff like, you've got data management patterns, so you've got how you're actually governing that data, what's the model that you're applying to really be able to ensure that you've got that trusted source. One sec. And then you've also got stuff like data products. So as was mentioned before, how are you actually wrapping up these data sets to say, yes, this is a really useful asset, this is something that we can really advocate for within the organization. And then, as was mentioned before, I think wrapping that up in a domain model and actually saying, this data aligns with the way that the business sees data, that's a really important thing. Moving on to the enablers. So you've got stuff like data literacy. So you've got, is the business actually coming along that journey with you? Or is it maybe, as was mentioned by Savi, is there a slight disconnect between the business maybe wants one thing, but IT is going off and doing its own thing? Are you actually nailing that journey forward? And I think that comes from data engineering, from data analytics, from maybe a kind of broader upskill in terms of how data is seen in an organization. And then finally, yeah, we've got these foundational data capabilities. So it's, are you creating those cornerstones within your organization that really let you kick on? Because you can't just, as much as you might want to, you can't just buy a tool, slap it on top of your existing estate, and call it job done. What that will likely do is just introduce tech debt. It will almost kind of hamstring you, I guess, in the sense that you're actually blocking yourself from being able to do the really interesting things with your data because you've got a system that's lost that trust. And I think that's a really key thing. We've spoken to an organization kind of in the insurance sector where right now they're really, really interested in leveraging their data and understanding maybe the relationships between different sets of data. Unfortunately, the kind of data marketplace they've set up is one they've built themselves and it hasn't landed. So what ends up happening is that you've got these back doors where somebody will just say, hey, I need access to this finance data for a report. Well, actually, rather than going through the quote-unquote data marketplace they've set up, what they'll do is they'll just ask their mates, can I have this data spun up? Because it hasn't been able to demonstrate the value, and that's because they didn't work from the bottom up. They didn't make sure that they had good data quality. They didn't make sure they had good data governance. So you end up with a kind of platform which is slow and not showing value. So it just sits in a corner. It doesn't really do anything. And you lose that opportunity to really make the use of data, which I think, as James mentioned, that's really the key thing. If people really, really want to be doing kind of that AI machine learning element, you really, really need great data. You need real trust in that data. You need to be able to see the lineage. If you haven't built out these foundational capabilities, you kind of don't really have a chance of having this platform land within the organization. Cool, so moving on to this next slide. So what I've got here is maybe some opportunities and also some challenges that we've seen within this kind of process of building up to a data marketplace. So they're not all necessarily in terms of the implementation of the marketplace itself. Some of them are more in terms of trying to upskill those foundational elements. But yeah, so in terms of the benefits or the opportunities, we've got these cross-functional insights. So the fact that, like I mentioned, you can start to kind of merge data together. I think in that insurance example, one of the really big things that they want to do right now is be able to cross-sell their products. And that's really difficult if you don't have a good understanding of the data that sits in different domains. So what they're starting to do is at least try to have this cross-functional insight so that they can get the most out of their data. That there's no point having these silos of really great work that operate without that visibility of what other people are doing. In terms of a kind of data visibility sense, agile decision making. So what having a centralized storefront does as well is it showcases this is where my data lives. It makes it really easy to be able to see what's going on in the organization, which means that you can have the data much more quickly and you're able to make decisions much more quickly based on these data-driven outcomes. In terms of innovation, and I think maybe these bottom two go hand in hand to a degree, but having access to that diverse data set and having people within the business really understand the scope of what can be done with data when it is all joined up, that is only going to foster more innovation, which ultimately may end up in kind of in the AI ML space. In terms of challenges that we've seen, so one of the big ones, I think it was mentioned by Savvy, is a kind of legacy data landscape that isn't aligned maybe with modern practices. I think that is both a physical sense. So you may well have, some IBM style system that's not allowing you to really harvest that data and exploit it how you might want to. But it's also about the way that you're kind of considering data in a broader context. So there was a client that we worked with who, as part of their kind of data governance uplift, they couldn't figure out what their data domains were. They found it really difficult to say, within our data landscape, rather than domains being system-driven or business function-driven, we need to switch around so that the domains actually mean something within a business context. That was a really difficult thing, and I think not having a modern mindset in terms of your data landscape really, really limits you, because then suddenly your entire structure of the products within your data marketplace are ever so slightly kind of misaligned with their intended use. I think that can really hamper the visibility element of the data marketplace. We've also got data quality blind spots. I think that this seems like an eternal problem in terms of people realizing that the quality of their data actually isn't good enough to do the things that they want to do. You can have all the best intentions of the world, but if you look at the data and realize that you're not actually capturing what you want to be capturing, or maybe certain business rules aren't being applied that you thought might be, what you end up with is, I think, like Savvy mentioned, it's the garbage in, garbage out kind of paradigm. But again, that's a really, really key thing when you're trying to do AI or to do machine learning. You need to have absolute trust in the data you've got. Otherwise, that entire kind of development of the model kind of falls apart because suddenly you're making these kind of decisions, or you're presenting these findings based on essentially dodgy data. So the next thing here that we've got in terms of challenges, so immature data governance. I think it's been mentioned previously, and also at the insurer that I mentioned before, you shouldn't be able to circumvent these trusted data sets and the way of accessing these data sets. You shouldn't just be able to go off and do your own thing. You shouldn't be able to grab data from any layer of the data warehouse that you would choose. You should have a governance structure in place that says, this is what the data is, and this is how you access it, this is how you interact with it, this is how you gain value from it. And I think that as companies are starting more and more to really want to do stuff with their data, they're often maybe skipping that first step of saying, okay, what is it we have, and how do we want people to access it? And then that only grows and grows to a bit of a spider's web of different links that are maybe undocumented, unmanaged. The data marketplace will solve that, but it needs that outside structures. It needs those governance things to be able to get the most out of the data marketplace, and that idea of having this centralized place where you're showcasing the data you have. The final point here, so I've got cultural resistance. I think this is a really big thing, and maybe broadly speaking it's covered elsewhere, but I think it's something which is often missed. Savi mentioned before the MDM solution that kind of got built in isolation and then presented to the business and just left to die essentially. But you need the business to really buy into the value in shifting their approach to data and access to data. I think it can be difficult when members of the business, like we said previously, may rely on Excels or whatever else to get their data, and they think that's fine. And it needs an advocacy piece to say, actually, there is real, if we want to continue doing what we're doing right now, maybe Excel isn't great, but maybe it kind of does the job. But if we are serious in wanting to be a more data-driven organization, if we're serious in wanting to really get the outcomes that we want based on data, then we need buy-in across the organizations, from IT and from the business side. Just to expand on that kind of cultural point, one of the big things in terms of that cultural aspect is, as I mentioned before with the insurer, if you haven't got the culture, if you haven't really gone for getting this adoption to land, you end up in a place where you've almost spent some of your trust, but you haven't actually got the value out of it. And I think that's one of the really important things, is that a data marketplace unlocks so much value, whether it's in the standard exposure of data products and data sets, or as Savi mentioned, it can be a data marketplace which is a shopfront for AI models and for access to, whether it's training data, whether it's the model itself. It can really be a springboard for adoption of AI, but only if you've got the business actually championing for it and saying, this is something which is really going to drive value. It's really going to help us and achieve our business outcomes, and it has that link to what the business are actually looking for. Without that, and without a really clear implementation and adoption of those foundational elements, you're never going to end up with an organization which really feels like it understands its data and is literate and really making the best of the data it has. So I think that's kind of the final message on the data marketplace front, is that it may well be a kind of technical solution, and it can be really great, but it's only that good if you have these foundational elements in place, if you've got the governance, if you've got data quality, if you've got data architectures which are strategically aligned. Without that stuff, you're maybe going to end up landing flat and not be able to get the value that you want, both in a maybe standard data sense, but also as organizations try to be more, or to adopt more AI capabilities. That's it. Yeah. So we have a short video that, James, can you, is it that one? This one here? Yeah. So hopefully, we've got a short video here which hopefully kind of encapsulates some of the stuff we've said, specifically about data marketplace and how it can be that launch pad to really kind of getting those business outcomes that the organizations want, hopefully.
Great business decisions are based on the foundations of good data. However, data isn't powerful unless you can access and interpret it. Collecting data is the easy part, but transforming it into a valuable asset, that's not so straightforward. End users don't always have access to the data they need. Different departments may use different systems, and creating reports from siloed datasets can be a complex and expensive process, requiring a lengthy technology project. All these problems mean that data leaders are struggling to provision data to their workforce, leading to business needs not being met. Glue Reply can help you remove barriers and improve data democratization in your organization. Imagine a data marketplace that allows users from all areas of the organization to discover reusable data assets, select data products or services from a catalog, and generate new custom reports. User-friendly tooling puts the data consumer in the driving seat to leverage value in an agile, governed, and self-served way. Our approach to realizing an enterprise data marketplace is to help you build out the data capabilities incrementally and lay the foundations of a best-in-breed data function, delivering outcomes and value to the wider business right away. No matter where you are on your data journey, Glue Reply has the capabilities to help you access, exploit, and interrogate your data through effective architecture, management, and governance. Your business, powered by data.
Yeah, so I think that's it in terms of presentation at the moment. So it's just like to open up to the floor. Is there any sort of questions that we can take whilst you're here? We'll be around for a bit after this, so if you wanted to catch us in private, go for it as well. But any questions, thoughts, disagreements? Okay, I think we can give. We'll go on. You get data teams who are basically churning through their current backlog on current tech stacks, on legacy systems, like things that don't connect up, things where you're basically manually moving files from one place to the other, process it, running a stored product, doing something, and they basically just have to meet the demand, but they're also getting other demands saying like, oh, we need to be better, we need to get data mesh in, we need to do something else. And it's just sort of proliferating the data stack. It's just becoming unwieldy, big, and it's the data teams that are getting squashed in the middle. The business is getting unhappy because they're not able to get the results that they want. And it's this sort of advocacy that needs to be done at the top level to the business leaders to say, we know what you want, we know what good looks like, but we're not able to do that if the tech that we're playing with, if the solutions and the ways of working that we're working with are 10 years, 20 years out of date. And it's that sort of mind shift that needs to happen with data leaders and business leaders to say, we can get to a better place, but this is sort of the investments that we need to make in like the data governance space, in the data dictionary space, in like tooling space, getting into cloud, getting access to like the AI models, the ML models that are available there, and actually having good data to feed into it. At the moment, for a lot of people, doing even like a simple report that crosses multiple business functions or business groups is a huge process because you have to spin up a project to go fetch the data. And it's the idea of the data marketplace, or this storefront idea is like, here's the thing that you get out at the end of it. It's not a data dictionary. It's not like a data platform. It's like this whole new way of working. So that's sort of why we've taken this kind of angle to it. But it's an investment piece. If people carry on the way they are, picking and plugging new tooling, it's just going to carry on. And data teams are going to carry on getting stretched. Yeah, any other questions? Cool. Yeah, I think that's it from us. Hope everyone has a productive next sessions, I think.